Estás escuchando Conversaciones de Altura.
Hello.
So thank you for tuning in for the first English edition of the podcast Conversaciones de Altura. And I'm really happy to be doing this for the first time with my main man, Aaron Beam from the mighty, powerful Red Fang. Welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Joel. Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, man. It's been, what's that expression? Long overdue.
Yes, exactly.
We met in like 2011, around there. Remember we were doing this weird tour?
Yeah, that was a strange one, all right. The Metal Alliance tour.
And it was...
you were doing merch for Helmet, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and since then we've been keeping in touch, and I've been proud of you guys, of Red Fang. I've seen you grow from that time that I saw you till recent days, and now you guys are not fucking around. You're playing all over the glove.
Yeah. Definitely, we've seen a lot more parts of the world than I ever would have had I not played in this band.
Yeah, for sure, man. And you've been in the band since when? Since like 2004?
2005 is when me and John and David started playing together, and then the band played its first show December 31st, 2005.
Oh, okay, yeah. I wasn't really sure about the dates, but something that really kept me thinking is, how do you guys keep your relationship healthy? Because from the outside, it seems that you guys get along really well. And I've been lucky enough to hang out with you guys, not only during shows, but outside of what a rock and roll show is. So I get to see a little bit of your interaction within the group, and I really admire that. It seems that you have like a really healthy relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is that we started out more as friends than as bandmates. You know, we were all just part of the same social scene in Portland and had known each other for years before we started playing together. And we're all pretty used to the stresses that go along with being on the road. And so none of us generally tend to throw a lot of temper tantrums anymore. And we're also all in our mid-40s, and so kind of like our egos are gone and our testosterone levels are lower, so there's just a lot less there's just less conflict in general, you know.
Yeah, for sure. And the idea that it's like a family, right? It's like, why do we have to fight if we are mature enough to get through our issues?
Yeah, it's very much like a family, because it's one of those things where we are bonded together not necessarily through blood, but through a commonality of musical interests and goals. And so it's sort of like fate chose us to all be together in the same way that, you know, a family, you don't get to choose who your brothers and sisters or mom and dad are.
Yeah,
and so you just have to work out how to get along with them or be miserable.
Sorry, could you repeat that again, please?
Oh, I said that because you don't get to choose your family, you have to figure out how to get along with them or just be miserable.
True, especially if you are on the road for months at times, right? Like, you guys tour for like 2-3 months in a row, and it's like, okay, I gotta see these guys every day, right?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily 2 months straight, but we'll do a lot of touring over the course of maybe 2 or 3 months where we're not home very much. And so because you're with your bandmates close to 24 hours a day, it's definitely not a good idea to have a lot of like friction and stuff between yourselves. And so whatever you can do to avoid it, it's just going to make everyone's lives easier.
Yeah, for sure. But have you ever been in that situation where, I mean, and you don't have to talk about that situation per se, but a situation where you might be you might be upset at someone in the band, and how do you overcome that? Just by talking, or I'm really interested in the interaction between the smaller groups as opposed to a society.
Sure. Well, in the early days when we just were first starting out, I was, and I can only really speak for myself, I was a unhappier person in general. And I would just sort of I would fly off the handle sometimes. And if I was mad, I was never really mad at any particular person. I would just, I guess that's not entirely true. If I was mad at any particular person, it was probably myself.
Yeah. Interesting.
And so then I would just, I would throw some tantrums sometimes. And I'd yell at everybody for no reason generally. And so I think for me personally, it's more just a internal thing about my own temper or my own satisfaction in life in general, and just going a little bit more introspective about why it was that I would be angry at somebody else, or why would I feel compelled to yell at somebody for something that was just totally not worth yelling about. And so I sort of checked myself over the years, and I'm happier in my personal life, and I do a little more meditating and stuff like that. So I'm just a calmer person than I used to be. Yep.
It's interesting because you don't strike me as an angry person. But then again, I met you a few years ago, not that long ago, and I really appreciate that you took the chance to do all this introspection, right?
Yeah. Well, I think hopefully everybody appreciates it. I certainly, I enjoy life a lot more than, I've always enjoyed life, but I feel like I went through some pretty dark periods, and right now is my favorite time of life ever. Partly because right now is the only thing that exists. So it better be your favorite time in life, because if you're dwelling on the past, it's pointless because you'll never experience the past again. If you're dwelling on the future, that's pointless also because you only exist right now.
Yeah, no, that's very that's a very important thing to have in mind at all times. It's easier said than done. But
yes, for sure.
Yeah,
it takes practice. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, you mentioned that you are meditating. What type of meditation do you do?
Just mindfulness meditation. So I started doing it probably about 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And
I didn't know that.
Off and on. I didn't do any proper sitting meditations at the beginning. It was more just general mindfulness. And then I started really doing kind of more regular meditation only just about a year or so ago. And recently got the app of this guy, Sam Harris. It's called Waking Up.
Yeah. How?
And
is that working for you? I'm curious about that.
I love it. It's great. And his meditations are only 10 minutes long, so it's a lot easier to stay on top of it just doing 10 minutes a day.
Yeah, I like Sam Harris. I agree with, I would say with 70% of the things that he says.
Yes, I'm about the same.
Yeah, there are things that I'm I disagree with you. But when it comes to meditation and all that, I really admire the guy because he doesn't fuck around and he goes to the point, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure. That he's not about all the frou-frou stuff about meditation, but just about how much
the practical stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which, don't get me wrong, we talked about this when you were in Mexico. I'm kind of like a hippie in a closet.
Yes, I do remember.
As in, I do believe in a lot of I think the expression in English is very airy, or you know what I'm talking about?
Say it. Say it again.
Yeah, like I do believe in the very airy stuff of meditation.
Oh yeah, the airy fairy stuff.
Yeah, like the spiritual practices, if you may.
Sure.
Have you?
I think that there's benefits to all that stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that sometimes, people who are in that camp of like atheists, self-identified atheists, are so anti-spiritual sometimes that it's to their detriment. I think that there's something valuable to be gained from the peace that spirituality can bring. And spirituality doesn't necessarily have to be about, higher power beings or anything like that at all. It can just be about feeling some sort of connection with like quantum physics or the higher power of nature or whatever it is. And it's not necessarily guided power. It's just that there's something mysterious about the universe.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, I think I do agree with you, because I think the universe is there's a lot of perfection, if that makes any sense. The way trees grow, something really cliche, and you don't really have to believe in a God to be spiritual. That's just my opinion. Even about, you write music, right? And you get inspired sometimes. Where do you think, changing a little bit of gears here, where do you think that inspiration or that, I would say so, like that inspiration or that, how can I say it? Where that music comes from? Like when you sit down and do you say, okay, I'm going to write this type of music, or how do you make it happen? Sorry, it's a loaded question, but
no, not at all. That you've probably heard this answer a few times. It's not like something that I can do with any kind of intent or force at all. It's just when you pick up a guitar or the bass or whatever, and you just start plucking around on the strings, and then something just pops out. And in a lot of cases, it's traceable back to whatever music I've been listening to recently, or something that stuck in my head from a couple tours ago, or from it's almost always pieces of music that I'm inspired by that then kind of get drilled into my brain somewhere, and then they pop back out when I sit down to try to make something up. And it's never like I'm never intentionally trying to create any particular style or sound or anything.
Right.
It's just the things that kind of fall out of my hands, probably because of things that go in my ears and then rattle around inside my brain, and then they come back out of my fingers.
Yeah, for sure. Do you believe that I was reading this book, The Art of War, and then he put out a second part, can't remember. Going Pro is the second part from this. I forgot the name of the author. But the idea is that when you put the work, that be sitting down and practice your instrument, or sitting in front of a computer and write down your book, or whatever your art is, or it doesn't have to be art, but your work is. The idea that this guy has is that once you do that, once you put out the work, something, he calls it the muse, comes and visit you, and the muse is present, is in this case music.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I kind of have a sort of more, I guess, a less fantastical view of where that inspiration comes from, just from having done it for so long now.
Yeah.
That I feel like it's at least for me, for the things that I write, I feel like I can almost always trace them back to, that's just me trying to play that riff that I really love from some song, but just not doing it quite right, not know it. So I feel like it's when you practice your instrument enough, your fingers know more about how to play stuff than your consciousness may be aware of. And that just hearing it, your fingers probably already know how to do it, at least some facsimile of it. And so then when you sit down a month later and start playing, it's that stuff just comes out, and it's not, and it definitely can feel sort of like where did that come from? But I guess it's happened to me enough times where I've written a thing and got really excited about it, and then I realized, a week or two later that, oh, actually that's just basically exactly this other band's riff that I just changed the key and changed one note or something, So I've had to throw a lot of stuff away because of that too.
Interesting.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, and I think that there's a reason why when you take writing composition classes, that one of the first things that a lot of professors will have you do is write in the style of other famous authors, so that you can get used to. You have to get used to being able to do other people's style so that you can develop your own style, because there's no way that you would ever be able to develop a writing style completely in a vacuum. It's just that that's all of that stuff is made. All art, whether it's music or painting or writing or whatever, is made in the context of other art.
Yeah, for sure. Being influenced.
Yeah, and it's all about an interpretation of our environment, more or less. And you need to have some sort of model for that. Sometimes it's not even necessarily, music doesn't necessarily have to inspire other music. You come from other places, but I do feel like it's all just reinterpreting.
Your life experience, right? What you hear, what you see, who you hang out with, what happened to you during the day. Maybe you woke up feeling really nice, and then you went to the bank and talked to someone in the bank. And
saw your balance, and then you feel horrible.
Yeah, exactly. And then you come back home and you write the saddest song ever, But then the next day you go out and hang out with your kid, and then you have the best day ever, and then you come back home and you write like the happiest, most loving song ever, right?
Yep, yeah.
But I do believe, maybe I'm just I'm being a romantic, but I do believe that we are like humans, or our brain, and and going back to Sam Harris, I think he will disagree with me, but fuck him. I do believe that we are like some sort of radio antenna, and is that how you say in English? Yeah, like we have like a radio. We're kind of like some sort of radio station, or not radio station, rather like a radio device, and then we just tune in to whatever we want to tune in. Like everything.
That makes sense to me.
Like everything, it's there,
Yeah.
But who knows?
Well,
man?
I think that he probably would agree with you on some level. I think a lot of the tuning happens by the language that we learn and the culture that we grow up in, and the constructs that whatever our society has decided to create, how those things help tune that antenna.
Okay. Yeah, no, for sure, man. It's all about like life experience, right? Like, you probably noticed this before Red Fan touring the world. You probably saw the world with different glasses, if that makes sense. As opposed to now, you travel all around Europe, Latin America, the States countless of times. You tour Australia too a few times, right?
Yes, 3 times.
How does that, going back to this influence thing, how does that have influenced your life in general?
Well, I feel super lucky to have been able to go all those places. And I guess for me, the more I have traveled around the world, the more I've realized that, part of it, to be fair, is that the people who come to see our band have something in common, which is that they like the type of music that our band plays. But in my experience, generally, people all around the world are not that much different from each other.
Yeah, we have like the same feelings, the same issues at a certain degree.
Yeah, and that a lot of people have kind of the same, there's like liberals and conservatives everywhere in the world. That's just sort of like, I think, a fundamental personality trait is whether you're more whether you're inclined to stick with the way things are or want to push things forward and change them. And in the arts world, it's far more people who are progressive than there are people who are conservative, because it's hard to create art that's just static and be successful.
Yeah,
so,
for sure. And people around the world feel that, and they think about the same things, just in different contexts. I think the context is what changes.
Yeah, I agree. And, but again, like, our experience is mostly with, it's 99.9% of our experience going to other countries involves doing the exact same thing that we do in the US, which is traveling from one nightclub to another nightclub and playing to a bunch of people who are rich enough to be able to afford to pay to come see a band and buy overpriced drinks. And, so we mostly interact with the rich part of the world. And whether, rich means like millionaire, or just, what I mean by rich is just rich enough to be able to have
to pay for a show,
a bunch of to have luxury income, to be able to buy stuff that's totally not necessary for your basic survival.
Yeah, for sure. Whether it's that in Brazil or in Sydney.
Yeah, exactly. Or Moscow or Lisbon, Portugal, or wherever it is. It's not people who are like not able to, who are struggling to feed themselves who come to see our show. It's people who have all of their basic needs are met. And then, so the point being just that that is going to narrow the focus of narrow the type of experience that we have. So that's one of the reasons that possibly you could say that everybody kind of seems essentially the same. They just have different accents,
Right.
And the food's better in some places than others.
Yeah, for sure, man. I can just imagine, right? Like especially somewhere in like Europe, like one day you're in Moscow and the next day you are in, I don't know, Germany, in Cologne or something, right? It must be a trip, if that makes any sense. It must be a trip to be in different cultures one day at a time.
It is also because like going from Germany to Italy and back or whatever, sometimes you'll hear, the people who don't travel as much within Europe, the Italians and Germans might have a lot of shit talking about each other. And I know it's not necessarily serious, but they'll shit talk each other about all this kind of stuff. And then meanwhile, I'm like, well, I just went back and forth between your two countries a whole bunch, and they don't really seem all that much different. Fun, like, sure, there's some cultural differences, but as far as just the people who come to our shows, they're not really that different. And it just seems funny to me that there's so much animosity can develop between people that, from my perspective, are not really that much different from each other.
Yeah, no, for sure. But is that something? Is that part of human nature? Because I bet you can see, I'm sure that you see that when you tour the States, like people from, I don't know, from the Northeast shitting on people from the South. Especially nowadays, I feel that the US is super divided, right? Yeah, you could see it almost anywhere, and it's just, I think it goes back to a sort of biological advantage of that tribalism has for our species when the population was much, much smaller, because you needed to rely on people in your immediate vicinity for your survival, and you had to distrust people from other little groups because they might come and take your resources and then you would die. And so I think that there's vestiges of that kind of important survival mentality that have persisted into the modern era, and they're not really advantageous anymore or necessary. No, for sure. I was late, like 2 days ago. I was, for some reason, and it's probably not my idea, but the idea that as humans we protected ourselves from animals, right? And once we overcame that and we became like this big civilization, through the years, now since we don't have to kill animals, we I don't want to sound like a fatalist, but now we fight against each other. Make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
But let's see where this goes. I'm really fascinated by the idea that things are changing to better or worse, and I don't know. I can only say that we live in fascinating, strange times.
Yeah.
To quote Joe Rogan, but it's interesting, right? How do you feel about things in the States nowadays?
I feel like we were just talking about this yesterday, that it's not just the States, but it's all over Europe and a lot of places that nationalism seems to be on the rise, and divisions between ideologues seem to be getting deeper, and it's a frightening time that seems like it could lead to some pretty nasty shit going down. Yes. My biggest concern is actually about, since I have a 9-year-old son. Yes. My biggest concern is some sort of like basically environmental catastrophe, and I think that is going to have potentially extremely disruptive consequences on the human population and population of most animals on the earth. And I think that humans in particular are probably going to suffer some pretty huge population
for sure,
losses.
Man.
I think there's going to be, droughts and famines all over the world, and it'll be a little bit of reset. And I think it's natural, and it's natural for humans to be sentimental about the human race, but I don't think that we're all necessarily all that special. And there have been lots and lots and lots of extinctions before us, and there may be a human extinction on the horizon. And of course, I don't want that for my son's sake, and just because I also have that sort of inherent sentimentality about humanity versus, about some bacteria that went extinct a million years ago. But ultimately, the universe will keep going with or without humans.
Yeah, for sure, man. No, I agree with you. I relate to you because I think I told you before, my brother and his family lives in Japan for like 14 years. He has 2 kids, and when not the earthquake, but the other, I forgot the word in English. Remember a few days.
The tsunami.
The tsunami, yes, thanks.
Yeah.
When that happened, I was like super worried for the aftermath, because they found a lot of radiation on the water and like close to Japan. So yeah, I can totally relate to that. But I think that at the end of the day, nature, Mother Nature, if you will like, she doesn't care about us.
Yeah, exactly. I feel exactly the same.
Like she can. I don't want to say destroy, but I can find a better word. But if she decides to destroy the earth or like humankind, I think the world itself is going to be better, if that makes sense. If not better, but it's going to keep itself growing, and it's going to be green again, and maybe, who knows, maybe we'll come back, or maybe we won't, right?
Yeah, I agree.
You know what? When I think of these things, for some reason, I feel more appreciative about life and about what I do. Does that happen to you?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's for sure. Those things go hand in hand. That realizing how fragile all of it is makes me appreciate the time that I get to have all the more.
Yeah, for sure, man. No, especially nowadays, right? So you mentioned before we started recording that you are in Denver now. Is that home now, or do you just go back and forth?
My folks live in Denver, so we're here for my wife and son. We're here for the holidays for 5 or 6 days.
So you're from Denver.
I grew up in Fort Collins, which is about an hour north, but my folks moved down here 10 or 12 years ago.
Okay, so the reason I'm asking you is because what do you think is the difference from, I guess in the music scene or the art scene from them, even politics from Denver to Portland?
They're actually pretty similar.
Like very liberal, right?
Yes, very liberal. Denver was, I think, the first city in the whole country to make recreational marijuana stores legal. It's a very progressive politically, and it's similarly situated close to a bunch of outdoor sort of recreational opportunities. And there's a lot of like healthy people who love to drink fancy beers and go to rock shows, and it has a kind of like similar size to Portland, and has a very similar energy to it for the arts and
yeah, for sure. It seems like they're very similar, but in different parts of the country.
Yeah, exactly. It's the landlocked mountain version of Portland.
And there's I can't remember the name of the city in Colorado where it's kind of like for hippies. Have you been there?
No, Boulder.
Boulder.
Yeah, it's called Boulder.
Have you visited there?
Yeah, I actually went to I spent about 3 or 4 days there last summer at a wedding. My wife's friend was getting married, and so we hung out there for a few days. It's nice. It's real nice. It's sort of like there's a town in Oregon called Eugene, and so it's like Eugene and Boulder are almost like sister cities, and then Portland and Denver are like sister cities.
Interesting. I don't think I went to Eugene. I went to another city in Oregon, and it was really strange for a Mexican,
oh, yeah?
for a Mexican person. If that yeah, I can't remember the name of the city. I know Paige from Helmet. He's from there. Medford. I think it's Medford.
Oh yeah. I was gonna guess Medford.
That's
in the south. Tell me more about what was strange about it as a Mexican person.
Well, it was strange for me because we had a day off, and for me, like a smaller town in Mexico is different as comparing it to a small town in the States, because a small town in Mexico is still very rustic. Is that the word?
Right. Yeah.
And I remember this town. For me, it was, like I said, it was weird because there was this big building with different. It was like a huge factory or something, and there were offices that they used to do they set up bars there, and you could go and see like the hip hop bar, and then you could go and see the country bar in the same building.
Okay. Yep.
And then we went.
I think that I guess my experience in a lot of other countries with small towns in other countries versus small towns in the U.S. is that in other countries the small towns feel, like you said, more rustic. They feel like a lot older.
Yes.
And they are smaller in every way, whereas the U.S. towns, I'm not saying this very well, but U.S. small towns oftentimes feel like they're trying to just be a small version of a big city.
Yes.
Does that make sense? So
totally.
They have all the same, they'll have like kind of the same stores and the same layout as a big city, but then they don't have enough people to fill it up. So it's sort of like this, it almost feels like a post-apocalyptic situation or something, where it's like the city just kind of doesn't have any inhabitants or something, because they built it like it was going to be a bigger city, like it's a bigger city than it is, whereas the small towns, a small town in Italy just has like, it has a church, and then it has a cafe and a couple little restaurants, but they're just like tiny little places because the town is tiny, so it doesn't need to be any bigger. But a small town in the U.S. will have like a McDonald's and a Starbucks and a Burger
Best
King
Buy.
and a big huge Walmart and all this stuff, but yet there's only 4,000 people who live there or whatever.
Yeah, you nailed it. Yeah, It's interesting because it seems that, like you said, in Italy, like the smaller cities are more organic.
Yes, exactly.
But you know and I don't know what to think of. Why you have like a city like Portland in Oregon, and maybe 2 hours away from it you have something like Medford, you know? And I'm not shitting on Medford. It's just my
Sure.
point of view as a foreigner, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the funny things about just states. One of the things that I think is good about the state system is that you're able to, and it's sort of like expanded to the entire country, the union of all these different states, is that you have people of pretty different cultural backgrounds and educational backgrounds, and who have totally different life experiences and maybe different politics, all having to coexist and somehow find a common ground within that state. So you'll have most of Oregon is probably a little bit more politically conservative, and it's a lot of farmland, and it's very rural, except for maybe Portland and Eugene are going to be the most kind of politically lefty. But
Yeah.
if you let the entire state be run just by the people from Portland, then it's going to destroy the farming communities, because the people in Portland just don't understand what is important to those people and what they need in order to continue to thrive and survive in their way of life. And so I think it's a really good thing, but it also sometimes might seem odd that you have such different politics all grouped under one state.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, it's the same in Colorado, if I'm not mistaken. Like Denver is more liberal, but if you go a little bit outside, it's more conservative, right?
Yeah, and so actually, and there's another parallel between Oregon and Colorado is right when I moved to Oregon, both states had these bills on their ballots that the voters could vote whether or not basically gay people got any quote unquote special rights, is how the conservatives who put the bills forward worded it. They were
Jesus.
essentially just trying to take rights away from gay people just for being gay. Like, oh, you're not allowed to have this type of we can fire you just for being gay or whatever.
Right.
And it actually passed in Colorado and
No
was
shit.
defeated in Oregon, but it was not like but it was still close in both places. And for the same reason that you were just talking about, that most of the state is conservative, and then there's pockets in the urban areas where it's more progressive.
Right. And do you still miss Colorado or Denver?
Well, I'm lucky that I get to come through here very regularly, so I like it here a lot, but I love Portland, so.
Did you move to Portland because of music, or were you like, okay, I want to try something new, or?
Well, I moved for college, and
Oh, okay.
but I was also partly motivated. My choice to go to Reed College, where I went to school, was partly motivated by its proximity to Sub Pop Records up in Seattle. So yeah, it was. Some of the decision had to do with music, but mostly I moved out just for school.
Okay, and then you're like, fuck it, this is home now.
Yeah, I just loved it from the moment that I moved out.
Yeah, for sure, man. I've been there a few times on tour, so I haven't had the chance to really lose myself or immerse myself in Portland. But it seems like it's a great town. But it's like but very very liberal. And I read probably like a year ago, maybe a little bit more, that there's this like Mexican place, like a burrito place, but then someone, because the owner was white, the owners were white, someone, like a group of I don't even know how to call them, they shut it down because they were what's that word? Cultural
appropriating. Yeah. It was cultural appropriation. That's one of the more frustrating, ridiculous stories about Portland for me. That it was two women who traveled to Mexico and studied how they studied a bunch of techniques for making Mexican food, and then came back up and opened up a little burrito cart. And they weren't hiding the fact that they learned how to make Mexican food in Mexico, but for some reason, and they just got targeted, I guess, because of, I don't know what exactly it was, but they got harassed so thoroughly that they ended up just shutting down their cart, and which I think is ridiculous, because what's the best way to learn how to make Mexican food? Go to Mexico,
Yeah, and even if
I feel like there's plenty of people who travel to France to learn how to cook French food, and you don't get mad at them for cultural appropriation or go to Italy to, like Mario Batali traveled to Italy to learn how. I mean, he's got problems of his, other problems that go far beyond this, but people don't get mad at him for traveling to Italy to learn how to make Italian food the way the Italians make it. Isn't that the most sensible thing to do, is learn from the place where it actually comes from? So I don't know. That's like part of that, where the liberalism and political correctness could go way, way, way too far.
Yeah, man. When I read that, I laughed, because I'm like, come on, I'm Mexican, and I don't really give a fuck. Even when I was living in Toronto, and I would see like Mexican restaurants owned by Canadians, I'm like, yeah, probably this is not the best Mexican food ever, but who gives a fuck, right?
Yeah, exactly. Why would you care if somebody is like, does it really have to be the case that the only people who can cook Mexican food are Mexicans? Like, what if I want to have Mexican food in Prague?
Yeah,
there's probably just not that many Mexicans there, It's going to be pretty frustrating if I have to wait until some Mexicans who feel like they also want to open a restaurant move to Prague. So, it just doesn't make any sense at all to me, because because that standard doesn't seem to be the case for most other cuisines. There's some people have made some stink about, there's a guy who opened a Thai restaurant called Pok Pok in Portland.
Yeah.
And he's a white guy. And so some people are a little irritated that a white guy has one of the more successful Thai restaurants in Portland, but he also spends, I think he said something like 3 months out of every year going back and studying with his teachers in Thailand to learn, to update and learn more techniques from them. And so to me, if it's good food,
it's good food.
I don't care what the nationality or the color of the person making it is. It doesn't make any difference at all. It's completely irrelevant.
No, man, I agree with you. And that has happened to me lately with music. Because before, when I grew up, I was really close-minded, as in I grew up listening to metal. So everything to me was either metal or hardcore, But nowadays, I'm like, if I like music and I think it's a good song, I don't really give a fuck if it was written by Ozzy Osbourne or by, Taylor Swift or,
Sure. I think that's a great place to be. It's a great place to be with respect to your musical taste. I mean, I feel the same thing, that people ask us all the time, what's your guilty pleasure? Like, what song on your iPod's your guilty pleasure? And I'm like, I'm too old to have those anymore. I can't feel guilty about any music that I like. If I like it, I like it. Can't possibly feel guilty about liking something.
Yeah, exactly, man. Yeah, why have a guilty pleasure, right? Like, if you're liking something, unless you're not harming someone else, if you like something, you like it, and that's it, right? But some people get so they get so stuck in that mindset, and I think that stops you from growing in life, not just.
I agree. I think it's important, though, at a point there's a point in your life when it is actually important to kind of have a narrower focus, at least for me. Like you said, when you're younger, you're like, I'm just listening to metal and hardcore, and it's partly because it's actually true that that's the only stuff that you like, but it's also because you need to create a community for yourself when you're younger, and you need to create a little bit of an identity so that you feel safer, and so that you can kind of develop, so that not everything is just a swirling mass of confusion and lack of direction. When you're in your late teens and early 20s, that's when you're figuring out who you are. Exactly. And to have some sort of anchors. It's really important, I think, to have some kind of anchors of what it is that you're going to use to kind of define your community, so that you can find yourself within that.
No, for sure, I agree. And it also has to do with, I believe that it has to do with how you are. We talked about this a few moments ago, about how you are doing inside. Like if you're an angry person, you find an outlet by listening and going to hardcore shows or metal shows and moshing until you sweat your ass off, right?
Yeah, or until you split your eyebrow open and you have to go to the hospital and get stitches.
Exactly, or until someone breaks your nose, like my friend. She got her nose broken at a NoFX show.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, I mean, but that's how you learn, right? And then you grow up, and then that type of music doesn't resonate with you, and maybe country music resonates with you.
Yeah.
It's just part of growing up, I think.
I agree.
So now, you know what? I'm thinking about. I was listening to, I think it was Nicky Six earlier today, and he was saying something about Motley Crue not being like, Motley Crue always wanted to be like a straight rock band, but then years later, can't remember the name, Tommy Lee started like experimenting with new sounds in his side projects. Do you ever, or how does the word experimental float around the Red Fang camp? Do you ever play around being more experimental? Does that cross your mind? You know what I mean? Sure.
Like branching out just from sort of the established version of our sound that we already have.
Yes. Like, I mean, I'm not saying that. I'm just curious about how you feel about Red Fang being a straight rock band, and sometimes do you feel like the need of being more experimental or just?
Oh, sure. I do plenty of things on my own when I have time, as far as, like I'll write just some acoustic guitar songs where it's just, acoustic guitar and me singing, or I've done some things just with keyboards or whatever, and I try to play piano sometimes when I have time and the inclination. But I feel like Red Fang, we don't ever rule any particular style or sound out from what we would ever do as a band. It's just that there's things that work for the four of us playing together and things that don't really work. And so it's not like we're saying that, there's some definition of which genres or sounds would qualify for being Red Fang and which ones wouldn't. It's just that there's stuff that we naturally do when the four of us are playing together that tends to generally be a little bit more straightforward kind of rock music or metal or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that, and we all do that to some degree. Like David has a kind of a noise project of his own called Treat Core, and Brian has recorded a couple things at home on his computer that's more like goth oriented. And
really?
I have Brian outlets too, but yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't see him as a person who could. It's not that he can't. It's just that he doesn't seem like, at least to me, like he would write like a goth song, But But that's fascinating. I like it.
Yeah.
So it's more like an organic thing. It's not that you get together and you are like, okay, now I'm going. Let's write a song that sounds more like Ministry or more like Jesus, I don't know, the Jesus lizard, or you know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's more
Oh,
organic.
for sure. Yeah. No, we've never. I don't think that any of us are actually even good enough to do that if we meant to. So if we even tried to do that, it would sound so little like whatever if we tried to write a ministry song, it would end up probably sounding like Hall & Oates.
That's cool too, man.
Yeah.
Why not, right?
Yeah.
But you know what I appreciate about you guys is that every record sound different. It does maintain the Red Fang stamp, but every record has its own heart and magic, if you will.
I believe that. That's true, and I appreciate you saying that. It's not, again, that's not something that we intended to do. It's just part of the way that we write is so much just about what's happening right now in our minds and our hearts. And so, because we don't have any we don't have a mission statement or a direction that we're trying to go in. We just follow whatever the muse is, if you will.
Yes, man. It's really. I'm really proud of you guys reaching the place that you have reached, because I met you when you were not starting out, but you were like really touring a lot, and then you reached to this place that I'm like, oh wow, I'm really happy for you guys.
Well, thanks. We're pretty excited about it too. We're constantly discovering new things about the band and about what life on the road can be like, and it's always an adventure.
No, I bet, man. I bet. And before, I know you have to go pretty soon. What's next for you, man? What's in the horizon for you?
The horizon is spending a lot of time writing, because we've been touring so much. We've started just amassing a crazy amount of riffs, but haven't really had the time to focus on turning them into proper songs.
Yeah.
And so we're going to just starting with the new year, just buckle down and just go into the woodshed and start bashing things, mooshing things together with sawdust and glue and
heart and balls.
Yeah, exactly, and crank out a whole bunch of songs from all these riffs. I think we could, if we had enough time, we could probably come up with another like 20 or 30 songs in the next few months. So we'll see.
But do you feel? Well, two last questions. The first question is
Sure.
Is that the thing that you enjoy the most of being in a band, the writing process?
Absolutely. I mean, that's
your favorite thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I got into music to do, was not necessarily to do it. I didn't even have really any particular thing as a goal. It was the thing that drove me to do music from the beginning without it ever even being a question, was just getting together with friends who had similar musical tastes and creating our own art. That's what drives me, and what I love to do the most is take, all the inspirations that have been rattling around inside my brain and then create my own versions of things, and it's just super rewarding just in a vacuum.
Wow.
And then I did have as a secondary goal was, once I joined this band, was I just want to be able to go on one US tour, because I'd never done it before. And once we did that, it was just like all exciting and onwards and upwards from there. But yeah, the writing has always been at the heart of it. That's the part that fulfills my soul. The other stuff is like fun adventures, but the writing is the soul fulfilling thing.
Interesting. And you know what? I appreciate that you said that your goal was to only tour once, and I believe that being detached of what you really want is what gets you what you want.
Yeah. It makes sense.
Sounds very hippie and very Buddhist, which I'm not. But
Right.
I really believe that, you know. I see a lot of people that they are so attached to the idea of being rock stars, but that attachment is what stops them from being where they want to be, right?
Well, yeah, because you're focused on all the wrong things. You're focused on when you're trying deliberately to do a thing to get people's attention or whatever, or to make people care about your music, that it just is. People are smarter than that, and they can see through it. They can see through that you're not being genuine.
Yeah,
You know
exactly.
what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure, man. And well, man, I know you gotta go, and I really, really appreciate you taking the time for doing this. We gotta do the second part maybe next year.
Yeah, that'd be great. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, me too, man. It's always a pleasure talking to you. And oh, yeah, I was gonna say there's this TED Talk. I'm going to send you the link. It's about
Excellent.
Being creative, and it has a lot to do with what we were talking of being influenced by other people. It's called. You probably not sure if you heard about the book. It's called. I've been sleeping on the names.
That's all right. That's all right.
The Art of Stealing or something.
Okay.
How to steal like an artist.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I have heard of it. But yeah, I'd love to hear that. Love to see the TED Talk.
Yes, man, for sure. And I'll send you some other links, because I know you and I have kind of like the same interest when it comes to like people like Sam Harris and stuff like that.
Yes, for sure.
Well, thanks, brother. I really appreciate it, and we'll be in touch for sure.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
And enjoy you're going to the zoo now?
Yeah, to the zoo lights. They have Christmas lights up at the zoo. So.
Oh man, it must be beautiful, man. I kind of miss being surrounded by mountains. I mean, I guess I am because I'm in Mexico City.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure you are.
But you see in Mexico City, it's not the same as Denver. You can actually see the mountains in Denver.
Yeah, it is a little different. But, yeah.
And I bet the weed there is tremendous.
Oh yeah, it's powerful.
Okay, brother. Thanks you so much, man. We'll be in touch.
Sounds good.
Thanks, brother. Love you. Bye bye.
Love you too. Bye.
Acabas de escuchar Conversaciones de Altura.